I'm honored to stand with these courageous doctors and my colleagues. COVID was created in a communist Chinese lab and released upon the world. Governments across the world responded with oppression of their peoples, and at various levels amongst our own sovereign states, the citizenry of America suffered oppressive action by our governors. I will never forgive my own governor of Louisiana for what he did to our people. My father in law, my wife's father, Mr. Dave, died on December the 12th, 2020, in the hospital, sick with COVID. His wife, my mother in law, Mama, his wife of 46 years, and his daughter, my wife, were not able to hold that man's hand when he died. Why? Because the government restricted our access to our loved ones. I went through this with my family. Many of you did. From sea to shining sea, Americans suffered unbelievably that form of government oppression. We were not allowed to congregate in our churches, gather in our homes, walk in our neighborhood without a mask, participate in sports events with our children. This was all brought upon us by government oppression. I stand against it. I always will. With the last drop of my life's blood, I stand with men and women like this against any government oppression in any form. When it comes to your home and your doorstep, I advise you stand up, because there's another wave of oppression coming. I suspect it will coincide with next year's election cycle. I advise you to maintain your freedoms. Do not comply with unconstitutional oppressive commands. Stand your ground. You will find yourself not alone. There are still those amongst us that dwell within this halls of power. There are judges behind us that recognize your right to live free. And there are doctors that stand before you that have prepared to risk their entire career in order to reveal the truth and communicate the truth and stand upon that truth. I love and care for you all. I'm honored to serve you and to stand with these men and women.
I introduce myself. I'm Dr. Bayou, and again, I just want to thank you all for taking the time out of your day to be here. You could be any place in the world, but you chose to be here this afternoon, and just want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts that you came. I would ask everybody to stand, and Father Carlos, if you would come up, we're going to open up with prayer and the pledge. If anybody's an active member of the military or reservist, after the pledge is over, if you could remain standing, we'd like to recognize you. Father.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. God, our Father, we thank you for your graces. And we thank you as well for all the blessings that you bestowed upon each and one of us, and most especially our communities. You have said that everything you have created is good, and you have entrusted to us the care of this earth. You have called each and one of us to be good stewards of your creation. We thank you for the men and women indeed who have dedicated their lives in service. We thank you as well for those many men and women who have given themselves wholeheartedly to public service. We ask that you continue to enlighten us, because we're still aware that there are still many questions, many concerns, many issues that affect our people. We have to continue to bless each and every one of us, most especially our candidates, and all those who would be our leaders, so that in everything that we do, we may always do what is right, what is good, what is just, what is honorable, and what is holy. We thank you as well for all your graces, but that at the same time, we may always will to do what needs to be done, and to will as well in order to bear good fruit in all that we do for our community. And we ask to this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Then in the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag Thank you. You may be seated. Those who are current or have served in the military, if we could just give these men and women a hand. Thank you so much. Who close the service? We have a lot to do this evening. So what we're going to try to do it is in a wonderful fashion. So I think you're going to enjoy what we have for you. We're going to begin with our first speaker, Senator Mike Facey, District 20. Senator Facey will speak on the economic impact COVID has had on our community.
Thank you, and thank you all for inviting me here. You know, when I was asked to speak on this, I was torn quite a few different ways on where I would start. So I'm kind of start what's happening now to see what COVID has caused, and I'll get into the details. Some of the information I have is from Dr. Scott, who has done our economic stats for Louisiana for many years. The false job growth that the Biden administration is putting out about how many jobs they make, over 60% of them are government jobs. The government jobs is like a double whammy on us because now we're paying more people to come after us. So just thought I'd get that out there. And also in office, he formed what he called he created the Office of Environmental Justice. Does anybody here ever heard of that? Okay, a few y'all. Well, the Department of Environmental Justice is hiring more government people to come into our state to go find problems with every one of our industries and then fine them major fines. Now, the key to this is that you can't repair whatever they say is wrong yourself. You have to hire their agency that comes in and repair it, and whatever the bill is, you got to foot. So if that's not big government overreach, so what I did, I passed a resolution year before last that for our Attorney General to protect every organization in our state and individual, if the Office of Environmental Justice knocks on your door, he's supposed to file suit to protect you from that point. So this year, with the right governor, I'll make that a bill. I had to do it a resolution knowing that John Bell would have vetoed it. So the thing was, in the House, I got all yeas, and in the Senate, we got all yeas. So even the Democrat side understood what's going on. So we just got to explain some of these things and get it right. The COVID recovery in Mississippi, Arkansas, and Texas all outdone Louisiana by a whole third. They were a third ahead of us in all of that because of some of the things we had in place in our state. To give you a little bit of statistics, Louisiana only came back at a 6% rate per month versus all the rest of them coming back at maybe 10%. The home area, from just the statistics that they had, we lost 9,200 jobs in 2020. And in 2021, we still lost another 4,200. In 2021, we began having a 54% comeback when most of the other states were in the 60s. But due to our government issues that we put in place, it was a lot longer and a lot more difficult. When the revisions came out for 2020 data, the December employment number for Louisiana was revised downward by 72,000 jobs throughout the state. 90% of all production in the Gulf of Mexico is serviced through the Port Fourchon in my Senate district. Port Fourchon puts $500 million a day into our US GDP. A lot of people never hear that number, but it's very important on how our region helps the rest of the country. During COVID, the worldwide consumption on oil dropped 18 million barrels a day, which was a tremendous hit to our state and Texas. Louisiana gained $5.7 billion for COVID relief, which caused positive growth to our economy, and now creating an employment problem trying to get people back to work because we had so much money just given out and handed out. So now I'm trying to get to what really went down that we had to do during COVID. We gotta take away what they did, the control that they did, and our representative up there, our congressman in Washington just spelled it out. The first challenge, we were forced to take a vaccine with no track record. In my business, a lot of our engineers that work in the business that I am, being in the pipeline business, a lot of those guys had 20 to 30 years and they wasn't taking a vaccine, so they had to quit their jobs. And it left new engineers without any experience left to run their business. It's taken 3 years to get everybody back in the right motion, getting things done. I'm in the pipeline business. We don't build new major pipelines. We take care of the old ones. There's more pipelines in the ground than there are highways. So when you ever see the road crews out fixing the potholes in the roadways, what my company does, we fix the potholes in the pipelines. We keep them safe before they get a hole. So with that, we lost 3 years of maintenance. And now we have to come back and try to catch up to make sure we keep everything safe. They took the freedom of speech away. Anyone that had any evidence on early treatment was shut off. Look, I got on a conversation with the Senate, all of the ones in the Senate. We called in and we were talking to the LDH president of Louisiana. And in that conversation, I brought up early treatment. And he shut me down real quick and said, Senator, there's no such thing as early treatment. I said, yeah, there is early treatment. And I named off all of the early treatment and why. And he says, you're not a doctor. You have no idea. I said, I don't care whether I'm a doctor or not, but I'm using knowledge and common sense that we do have early treatment. He said, no, they just got to get sick enough, go in the hospital, and get on the vent. So I'm sitting there arguing back and forth to where it really got heated. I didn't have one other senator jump in and back me up. So I just got upset and hung up the phone. And I called one of the senators that can kind of help control those I guess, talks. So they're supposed to record everything. So at that point, I asked for a recording of that conversation. Guess what? They lost it. So anyway, that proves our point. There was early treatment. We let people die, which I said in that conversation. And I can't believe our state is part of letting people die because there was early treatment. It's known fact. I caught COVID. I took ivermectin and zinc and some vitamins. I was better in 2 days. When I got back to the Senate floor, the first thing the newspaper guy asked me, he says, oh, I heard you took that cow medicine. I said, I sure did, and I'm here. I'm not on the vent, and I'm not going to the morgue. And he didn't know what to say. So those are the kind of things we fight. We need more help up there. And when they took our freedoms away, our freedom of speech, it was just everywhere. Every doctor, all the doctors you see back in our congressman, that was everywhere. We shut everybody up. On the freedom to worship, that was the worst thing we could have done. We kept all the big box stores open and not being able to go worship at any one of our churches. It was just terrible that we let the government stop us from our freedom. Our children were damaged severely, unnecessarily shutting down schools, keeping them at home. One of my employees' sons committed suicide during that time. He just couldn't take it not going to school. So who's the answer for that? Dr. Fauci, the whole government? What do we do? As far as wearing a face mask, you mentioned that. Look, I got 12 grandkids. It was a disaster trying to make them wear face masks. My oldest granddaughter, she kept getting infections, and they said, oh, well, she just have to not go to school. So we didn't let her go to school. The next thing on that is, so talking to different doctors, he said wearing a mask to stop it from that virus is like trying to keep mosquitoes out your backyard with a chain link fence. And that's exactly what it is. So the next thing, all I can say is we can't continue on in this manner and let the government control our lives. We must take a fight and stand up strong. Let's get an election that's clean and fair so we can win our country back. Thank you all very much.
Hi, I'm Daryl Amadeus. I'm a state rep for House District 51, and I have no opposition. I'm going into my third term in the House, which because of term limits is my final term. So I've got a long list of work that I want to get done under a different administration next time. So this evening I want to talk to you about the actions that the legislature took or tried to take through the whole pandemic. So if you remember, in 2020, whenever the governor issued his very first mandate, the legislature went home. Everything closed down. We went home for weeks. And when we came back, we had bills that we had filed for that session, and we didn't bother to bring some of them because the rules at the Capitol under the COVID shutdown was a list of things, like you have to have your temperature taken, wear a mask, social distance. We go into our committee rooms and the chairs had tape across all of them, so you could only sit so many seats near each other. And the conditions just were abnormal. And so whatever bills we had filed that didn't need to be heard that year, we just kind of waited and brought them back later. Well, we also brought some bills that year and the next year and the next year based on our experiences, our collective experiences with the whole frenzy. One of the first things the legislature did, especially in the House, was we found that there's a law that says that a governor's emergency health mandates can be halted or overturned by a petition signed by a simple majority of one house of the legislature. That means either the House or the Senate. So we did that. We had a petition. We had plenty of signatures. There were altogether, I think, 3 petitions that we had proposed. And we got signatures and we finally filed one. And as soon as we filed it, the governor immediately filed suit, which threw it into court. And there it sat for a long time. And the judge, who happened to be someone that the governor had picked, decided that one of the arguments against the petition was it needed to have signatures from both houses, not just one, because that's what it takes to pass a law. Well, many of us disagreed because a petition to overturn a mandate isn't a law, and the law that was on the books clearly stated one house. It only needed one house, and so we felt that the judge was wrong. And time went on, and eventually it just wandered through court and didn't go anywhere. So we tried many other things, many other bills. Now, there were a number of resolutions which the governor cannot veto, and there were a number of constitutional amendment proposals which the governor cannot veto. But for our purposes this evening, I didn't include those in this list because what I wanted to tell you about was the bills. I tried to break them down into categories here. So we handled at least 5 bills that would have somehow limited the governor's power. Things like prohibit enforcing restrictions concerning inspections and stuff that had to do with the emergency proclamation and an open safely program. You might remember that. A bill that dealt with the Administrative Procedures Act that would require that it be followed related to the COVID mandates. And when they were trying to implement implementation of any of the directives, they'd have to follow the Administrative Procedure Act. Bills that would provide to terminating the emergency. And anyway, here's the breakdown. Of the 5 bills I was looking at, 2 of them passed, but were vetoed. And no, they weren't overridden. One of them, the clock was allowed to run out. That means that, let's see, this was a House bill, and it went over to the Senate and made it all the way to the Senate floor, and then didn't get heard and the legislative session ended. That's very often done on purpose. Political. And 2 of them never even got heard in committee. Now, moving on to protecting employees from mandates. You might remember that. We could go back to work if we could just agree on the terms. Well, many employees felt pressured to require COVID shots and masks and testing and so on and so on. So we handled at least 8 bills that directly dealt with employee mandates. One of those passed with what was vetoed. 5 of them were killed either in committee or on the floor, and 2 of them never got heard in the first committee. Now remember that, there's a pattern here. Never got heard. The next category is prohibiting vaccine passports and protecting bodily autonomy, which means you get to decide what happens to your own body. In that category, there were 17 bills that I reviewed. 17. Some of those were mine. Some were Representative Kathy Edmonston, who couldn't be here tonight. Valerie Hodges, Larry Freeman, Senator Mike Basie. You'll remember a lot of the names that carried a lot of these bills. So of the 17, 4 of them passed, but were vetoed. One of them died in conference. That means it made it all the way through the process, but the conference that met to decide the differences between the House and the Senate amendments, the conference committee report never passed. One of them never got heard, and the remainder were all killed. Next category, schools. You remember the effort to try and reopen schools. Surely, kids have been out a long time. We need to reopen schools. So everybody was desperate to reopen the schools. Well, we have 9 bills relating to reopening of schools, to do it wisely and with common sense. Of the 9 bills, 2 of them passed and were vetoed. And then 7 of them were killed in committee or on the floor. And then my last category, hospitals and nursing homes. As you've heard already here tonight, some of the devastation that was caused to all of us was that knowing that our loved ones were in their final days alone. Well, they were with staff, but alone when you consider no one they knew, no one they recognized, their loved ones, their immediate family. Many of them died alone. And we don't ever want to go through that again. So there were 2 bills that were handled specifically to require that hospitals and nursing homes do allow visitation. One of the bills was mine, and it said that you could visit your loved one under the same conditions that staff can go into the room. If that means scrubbing up, it means scrubbing up. If it's a mask, it means wear a mask. Whatever. That was killed in committee. Finally, 2 years later, Representative Chuck Owen brought a bill, and it passed, and it was not vetoed. So of all the bills that I reviewed just for this list tonight, the bill that does require hospitals and nursing homes to allow for visitors under any health emergency circumstances was the only one that passed. So that means we have a lot of work yet to do, so we don't ever have to experience some of the same horrors that we experienced, right? Well, I'm so glad that there's an election in just a few days, because I brought all this up tonight to tell you elections have consequences. Elections have consequences. We could have been in a whole lot different position here in Louisiana had we been under a different administration and had different legislators. When you consider who you're voting for this week, please contact the candidates and ask them some hard questions. You don't have to ask them things like, are you pro-life? Because just about everybody will say yes. You need to ask them some things such as, do you believe that God gives us our rights and that it's the government's job to protect those rights? Ask them if they understand that the main entity that's trying to threaten those rights is the government. Ask them, do you believe that tax dollars are sacred because every single one was earned by the sweat and sacrifice of a taxpayer? Ask them, do they believe the government is not supposed to serve as an employment agency? How are we supposed to create jobs? But certainly not by increasing the government so that the government employs more people using our tax dollars. And ask them, do you believe that God has a plan for Louisiana that does not involve us being at the top of the poverty list? Louisiana is a state that has possibly the most natural resources of any state in the country. So when you hear a governor or some other political person stand up and say, Louisiana's stuck in poverty, more children in Louisiana live in poverty than any other state. When they say things like that, ask them what they're going to do to change that, because we are without excuse. If we have more natural resources than anyone else, we should be somewhere near the top, not the bottom. So please keep all that in mind. Quiz the candidates. If they can't stand being quizzed, there's your sign. When you quiz them, if they answer correctly, do two things. No, wait, do three. Number one, pray for them. Number two, vote for them. And number three, tell all your friends to vote for them too. Thank y'all.
Thank y'all so much for being here tonight. The real doctor is Dr. Evelyn next to me, and so I'm an academic doctor, you know, an overeducated person. I want to thank everybody on the panel and many of you who over the last 3 years or so fought against the tyranny of our government. And what you heard from our senator and our representative is basically what the government has tried to do in elections is centralize them in the executive branch and take away the power from the people's elected representatives, both at the national and the state level. They've tried to concentrate power in 4 areas, and this is nationally, and I'll bring it home to Louisiana also. One area that you're very familiar with is the private funding of public election officials and elections, most commonly called Zuckerbucks. So what happened in 2020 as a result of COVID, using PPE as the excuse, the Center for Tech and Civic Life, which is a Zuckerberg-funded 501c3 nonprofit, gave grants to states, to buy PPE, $400 and plus million worth. 95% of those Zuckerbucks were concentrated in Democratic counties and cities, 95%. And less than 2% was spent on PPE. What that money was used for is to take over local election offices in cities like Atlanta, Fulton County, Georgia. Have you heard of that place? Detroit, Wayne County, Michigan. Maricopa County, Arizona. Is it starting to make sense to you now? Those are the cities where the counting mysteriously stopped on that night when we all watched in horror as something that had never happened before happened. 5 Democratic cities stopped counting simultaneously with Trump ahead, and the next morning we learned that he lost. In Louisiana, the Secretary of State, Kyle Ardoin, was promoting Zuckerbucks with our clerks of court, who are the senior election officials in each parish. Attorney General Jeff Landry was asked to look into that and issued an opinion that private funding of elections in Louisiana was illegal. And so that program was stopped. But 2 of our parishes, I'll let you guess which one of them was, Orleans, took $600,000 before that program was stopped. And also in Calcasieu, about $350,000 were already taken in the program. But thanks to Attorney General Landry, we did not have the huge infusion of Zuckerbucks, which came with contracts and strings attached. I won't go into all the details, but you don't give $20 million to the state of Wisconsin, Madison, Wisconsin, and Milwaukee without strings. And those strings were meant to favor Democratic candidates, which is what we saw. The second area in which COVID was used was to inflate the voter rolls. And that's an ongoing thing that we've been fighting here in Louisiana, is inflated inaccurate voter rolls. Because of COVID restrictions, voters could not go and register in person. And so all kinds of legislative laws that had been passed by the people's representative were violated, resulting in dramatic inflation in the voter rolls. I'll give you one example. Back in Wisconsin, Wisconsin has 4 million voting age citizens, 4 million. At the end of the last presidential cycle, they had 7 million registered voters. Let me say that again. 4 million eligible voting age persons in the state of Wisconsin. Their voter rolls had 7 million registered voters. Here in Louisiana, we've done extensive research. We've done a canvass door to door here in Terrebonne. Who has helped with that? Who served your community? Thank you so much. And Beryl helped us too. That canvass, both physical canvass in 2 parishes, Ascension and Terrebonne, as well as a digital canvass where we looked at the voter rolls, people who had moved, so on and so forth, resulted in an estimate that we think we have 600,000 more or less ineligible voters on our rolls. That's 20% of our voter rolls, 20%. We have about 3 million voters. Why are voter rolls so important, and why do our adversaries insist on not cleaning them up? Well, you need a registered voter in order to do the fraud. And so the next part of what happened during COVID is a violation of many, many state laws in relaxing mail-in voting. Quite a few states just sent out ballots willy-nilly to every registered voter in the state. So go back to Wisconsin. You had 4 million legal voters potentially, but you had 7 million people on the rolls. How many, I'm a former professor, I don't get to give quizzes anymore. How many, but I'm gonna give you a quiz. How many ballots could have been mailed out in Wisconsin? Up to 7 million ballots.
And they also relaxed the chain of custody, which meant no signature verification. These ballots were everywhere. And so what you saw on election night, when the counting stopped, Trump was so far ahead in these critical states that they had to go find more ballots. And you've seen video of that in Detroit, Atlanta, and so on. I won't go into that. So ballots, mail-in ballots. Here in Louisiana, we have a pretty good mail-in ballot system that's an excuse-based system, unlike other states. You have to be over 65. There are multiple criteria. So our system is pretty good, and we did not detect that our system was exploited. But as we've been warned by our representative previously in the video, they're going to try to do things again. And so one of the main ways that in Wisconsin they exploited mail-in ballots was by stealing the identity of senior citizens, particularly those who were confined in nursing homes. So if you have a senior relative or friend who is in a nursing home, especially who's incapacitated, you can go on to the Go Vote system, the Secretary of State system, and look at whether or not they requested a ballot and whether that ballot was returned. All you need is their first name, their last name, their month and year of birth, and their zip code. My mother-in-law died tragically. We got her out of hospital and she died with us holding her hand, but she came close to being a victim of what the representative said. But I checked 3 months after she passed to see if she was still registered, and she was not. Guess what I'm going to do tomorrow? Check to see if she's been re-registered, because these people have all kinds of games that they're playing with our systems. Centralization is one of the keys to corruption. And what they did during COVID is they tried to make everything convenient, right? Oh, you can just mail it in, no problem. Convenience leads to centralization. Centralization leads to complexity. Do you know how many days they counted votes in some of these places? In Atlanta, in Georgia, they weren't finished for, I think, almost 20 days. Complexity. And complexity and centralization result in corruption. My area of academic research was corporate fraud and consumer protection. And every time you see a corporation with complex structures and accounting and all of that, highly centralized where only a few people control it, you can be sure that corruption is not far behind. So the fourth area, and I'll close with this, is they censored us, not only in COVID, but also in people who spoke out about elections, like some of us here at this table. I was here in Bayou country in last December speaking about election integrity, and the very next day I got a text from Vicky Kluche who said, YouTube took your video down. Now here we are in little old, no offense, but in little old South Louisiana, where we're all from. I'm a retired professor that taught at not a very good college. I have several degrees from LSU, which is a good school, but not a great school. And I'm speaking to 20, 30, 40, 50 people who want to learn about elections. And YouTube somehow found me and y'all and took us down. So we did a little sting operation. We took the video and we cut it into several parts and took my name off of it. Voila. It was still up. Okay? So they have used the weaponization of the federal government to come after people who wear cardigans like me and sandals, and They call me a bully and an intimidator. Right? So, what can you do about that? You should demand from your representatives and your federal representative and senators to defund CISA, defund the Election Assistance Commission, and severely curtail the weaponization of the Department of Homeland Security, which is no longer intended to protect us. They are coming after us. Make no mistake about it. Thank you very much.
All right, I want to give a shout out to Owen from Homo Christian Media Team. He is amazing. I have a PowerPoint presentation, so it can help me load this up. I'm going to be speaking on the medical portion of this. And sorry, I have my back to you. I'll advance through several slides because of discussions that we had here, but if there's time later, if people are interested to learn about what happened on the background scenes in the healthcare field, I'll be happy to review that. So I'm Dr. Evelyn Griffin, OBGYN for 17 years. I studied at Ross University, which I met my wonderful Cajun husband, Dr. Griffin, Dr. Joe Griffin. And I was born in communist Poland, so it gives me a level of perspective on this whole topic. Immigrated to Canada and then did my training in the US, so now I'm proud to be an American citizen. And we'll be discussing several things. This is the part that I'm going to skip through. That was here and discussed pretty well. But I will stop at one particular slide that does summarize where the medical education is and where doctors are, to further explain later, I can in question and answer, why doctors allowed this to happen. And if you see, this is a great graphic to show the corporate capture of public health. Doctors are the second from the bottom. The patients and the public, and then the doctors, and you see how much corruption there is, corporate corruption around us. So doctors have the privilege of having a certain status, I suppose, in society. However, they are regular people, unfortunately, just as easily steered as the public. Not you guys, the general public. So I'm going to skip through this. Okay, but I will say, what solution would you have when you do go to your doctor's appointment? What can you do? And I say, research your own topic. They say, don't go on Google and look at your condition. I encourage my patients to do so, and then come in and talk to me about it. And then we can discuss what's good information, what's not good information. It's all information. We need to discuss it. So research your topic and don't fear asking questions. Specifically, risks versus benefits. Doctor, you want me to take this medication? What's the risk? What's the benefit? If they look aggravated, don't want to discuss this with you, it's okay to ask for a second opinion. And if you feel defeated, know at the end of the day that you may be encouraging or triggering your provider to think independently and research themselves. So briefly about masks, just bringing home to Louisiana. If people didn't realize this is not about health, when they saw on Saturday, LSU Stadium was packed elbow to elbow with no masks on, and then on Monday, children were required 6 feet apart and masks on. Made no sense. That was not about health. So do they work? Just briefly, the WHO, Fauci, and CDC all actually listed before and during mandates that they did not work. But of course, this was not on mainstream media. They wanted better tests and better studies, and they came out 78 wonderful randomized controlled studies, which are the best studies you could have. That came out with a Cochrane review earlier this year. Tom Jefferson, who's an epidemiologist, I'm sorry this is not showing up, but it said basically the entire review, and this is a global expert review, said masks do not work, neither surgical, cloth, nor N95. Brief mention, many studies showing that there are health risks to masks. So we can, through We the People, I can act as a resource for anyone who has school children that should a mask mandate come back, act as a resource for knowledge, great studies that show that there is compromise for our children's health, and where to look for these studies. I can connect you with good resources to write letters to schools, to give your child an exemption, or to hopefully further educate the school. Okay, so what can we do? So Rosa Parks just said no, and that's what we need to do. Just say no, but it is good before you leave the house, if there ever is a mask mandate, to make a plan on what you will say and how to stick to that plan, and most importantly, stick to the businesses that do not have a mask mandate or any mandate for that matter. So I know everybody's interested from the physician point of view, vaccines. So of course the COVID vaccine was made to target the spike protein, and reviews specifically from Dr. Peter McCullough, he was one of the first to show a great review that digging all through the manufacturer's information, there really was no specific studies on genotoxicity, which is to see if this vaccine is going to impact our genome. Teratogenicity, which means will this somehow affect the baby soon after conception, or oncogenicity to see if there could be cancer effects. And also, there was concerning studies showing that this mRNA could get biodistributed everywhere. So you may recall in Japan was the one that forced Pfizer to give up their documents, and it showed that this was showing up in rats' ovarian tissue in rat studies. So, but much information that I'll keep brief for right now to show that there was concerns with the vaccines. Let me see. That's this. And of course, now we're seeing post-COVID syndrome. There is conflict, mainstream media saying it's post-COVID syndrome, but of course, it's very difficult to tease out from a vaccine syndrome. And that very much is convenient by design, because we don't really have a control group. We never did. We never had a control group where we were studying people who never had the vaccine. None of us really were studied, with follow-up for what our symptoms were, whether we had COVID or whether we had the vaccine, to really see. But the syndrome affects pretty much every organ in our body, including the heart. And one of the studies showed that 86% of deaths had no other explanation than the vaccine itself. I'm sure you guys are familiar with this type of thing. Why can this happen? This memes are wonderful because they really throw the truth at us in one picture. And so does it provide immunity only for the manufacturer? And why is this? It goes back in history to 86, Ronald Reagan with the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act signed the companies out of liability. And we can go into the reasons for that. But so the companies are unfortunately not liable. Okay. So new variants, basically I was asked to speak about any new variants. There's a lot of information out there, and it's because this COVID is splitting off into numerous variants. Currently, there are two main ones, EG.5, which named Eris, and BA.2.86 Pyrolan. Now, both of these are subvariants of another strain, XBB 1.16, and just remember that for 1 second. But see what they say here is currently, right now, the vaccine, the bivalent, all other vaccines that you may have heard of are currently discontinued. Their EUA was discontinued. In anticipation of the new vaccine, which is called the monovalent vaccine, which is coming out, it is specifically made against the XBB 1.5 subvariant. Okay, this all sounds like mumbo jumbo. That one, XBB, if you'll remember, it was nicknamed Kraken. Who remembers that one? Okay, Kraken. Basically, a subvariant that, if you don't remember, it's okay because it was kind of a nothing burger. It was told to us, okay, here's the next variant, you gotta fear it, of course. And it turned out to be a sniffle, cold, basically. That one is really not in the country anymore. There's only about 3% of the country that has this XBB Kraken variant. That is what this monovalent vaccine was made for. A very mild, granted contagious, but mild subvariant that is no longer around. These two, Eris and Pyrolis, are subvariants of it, and they are likewise considered to be mild. Specifically, from the CDC says Pyrolis may be more capable of causing infection in people who have previously had COVID or who have received COVID vaccines. I'm actually shocked they admitted that. But so why in the world would you get this next vaccine? A mention on Dr. Gert van Bosch. He is a Belgian virus expert. At the beginning of the pandemic, he was the one that was sounding the alarms that said, if we vaccinate in the middle of the pandemic, we are going to create new mutations. We're going to drive that. And it's very similar, not exactly the same, but similar to the idea of everybody knows if you overdo it with antibiotics and give it too much unnecessarily, it's going to create bacterial resistance. It's the exact same type of thing that's happening here. So we're seeing how now we have tons of new variants, and he was right. And this is something that I knew in Immunology 101 I was taught in college. So do we trust the next vaccine? Straight from Pfizer, from their presentation, they were showing, it really amazes me how this does not get on mainstream media. Of course, at the same time, I totally understand why it doesn't. That this new variant, the vaccine was studied on 20 mice. Specifically, this subvariant or this monovalent arm of the study was about 10 mice. That's all. So the people that are going to be getting this next vaccine, that's the only studies that were done on what they're going to be getting. So obviously more stringent studies are needed. Just a brief note, this can be, I will leave my slide deck with the Lead the People crew, so if anybody wants references or links, if anybody wants more information, for example, on vaccines in general, this is an excellent book that I'm reading right now, but we can discuss more later in Q&A. So, treatment. First, we'll review what I wouldn't recommend to take personally. Paxlovid. Paxlovid is fondly known in the medical community as a rebound drug. You get COVID, you take Paxlovid, you feel better, and then it comes back. This was made famous by Biden. Paxlovid came out soon after Biden had COVID, took Paxlovid, and then it rebounded. Next is remdesivir. Veklury is the other name. Just a handful of studies here showing how it really has a high amount of toxicity for the liver and kidneys. This is often given in hospital setting. So if you have a family member going to the hospital, at the minimum, I would make their wishes clear if they do not wish to receive this drug from the outset. Resources. Wonderful resources. This is the American Academy of Physicians and Surgeons. They put out a home guide for home care, meaning pre-treatment, early treatment, as well as Dr. McCullough. He's part of the AAPS, Dr. Peter McCullough. In the slide deck, you'll see the link to his website. He has early treatment protocols. He, along with several freedom fighters, has developed early treatment. Wonderful, well laid out treatment scenarios for the public as well as for providers. And he is very big on early on, and this is the nice application here, is doing providine, which is betadine. You can find this anywhere in a pharmacy where you can dilute this betadine and do a wash, a gargle in your throat or through the nose, mouth. There's a good description on his website, so that you can help prevent viral replication as you breathe in the air and the virus through your mouth and nose. This can be done for the flu, for the common cold. Very good application. Another great resource is FLCCC. Joe and I know both Dr. McCullough as well as these two founders, Dr. Pierre Corey and Dr. Paul Merrick. Their website also has wonderful resources. They also show you who to call if you need to get a prescription. There are many online groups now, thank goodness for telemedicine. That is one silver lining of COVID, is the ability to practice telemedicine has improved. So you would be able to get a prescription for a family member or be seen through FaceTime. And so this group, FLCCC, is most known for, other than their wonderful care of patients, is their support of ivermectin. It's not the only drug, there's a whole large protocol, but ivermectin, Senator Fessy, is a wonderful drug, and it does so much more than treat a lot of viral illnesses. But I referenced you because you said you were told you were not a doctor. Yeah. Even I myself, as a doctor, they don't want to listen to you either. It's staggering. I don't know what it is that they want, but and interestingly, what you were saying about not a horse, so FDA really gaslighted this issue when they tweeted out saying, "You are not a horse, seriously, I'll stop it." More recently, in August of this year, they were taken to court over this comment because behind their tweet came physicians being, their life being delicensed for prescribing ivermectin, not allowed to prescribe it, and pharmacies wouldn't fill it, based on the stance from the FDA. The FDA in August had to come around and say, "Oh, we really didn't mean that." No slap on the wrist, nothing. No coverage on mainstream media.
But they haven't taken that down off their website either.
Oh, I didn't.
That's
So
still there.
it's still there. Interesting. All right, so prevention. When the pandemic started, Joe and I were frontline workers. People were asking me, "Well, what are you guys doing, to not get sick?" And I had researched what we should do, basic lifestyle measures, and we started supplements. So I summarized that in COVID tips. We have a copy of that in the back. And so you're welcome to take a handout on the way out. It talks about lifestyle measures as well as the supplements that we take. Next, if you happen to have exposure and problems still with spike protein, there is a spike detox protocol. Best credited to Dr. Peter McCullough. He has studied this. It is 3 supplements that can be found in the vitamin supplement section of grocery stores or Amazon or wherever you want to find your supplements. It's nattokinase, bromelain, and curcumin. And you would take it daily for 3 or 12 months. You can speak with me or a physician. The only caution is they do act as blood thinners for the reason that COVID and spike protein acts as a thrombotic agent, which means it causes blood clotting. So you actually want something to counteract that. If you are already on a blood thinner at risk of bleeding, you would want to use this with caution. Otherwise, everyone else, it is pretty much a go. And this does count for people exposed to spike protein from either COVID or from the vaccine. Obviously, one would be more at risk the more boosters they get. All right, talking about true health, natural immunity, it really is a thing, if anybody had any doubt, even though they tried to suppress that information. But healthy lifestyle strengthens it. And lifestyle, if we take the measures to improve our lifestyle, it does improve our chances that we get COVID. However, the bonus is it actually lowers the risk of chronic illness, it improves chronic illnesses, and actually lowers the risk of cancer as well. So I do want to say we still need conventional medicine, but we really need to look at how what are we doing to contribute to our health? It's because currently there is a culture that almost all of us were born into, that we come into a provider, a doctor, and we have the illness, the doctor confirms you have the illness. You are then in a more, we call it paternalistic system where the doctor's here, you are here, you're the one with the problem, the doctor's going to take care of it for you, and that's it. So here's this medication, a pill, a procedure, and you say, okay, I'm going to take it, and that's the expectation. I'm going to get better after this. We really need to move more into a parallel paradigm where we are equal with our providers and we partner with our providers and say, okay, what do I need to do to improve my health? And I'm going to do it. We become partners that way. And that's the goal of lifestyle changes. So I do want to give recognition to Barbara O'Neill. She is maybe a very good example of lifestyle changes. She is an Australian naturopath who summarizes probably the best that I know of all holistic lifestyle change people on what measures we should do. And we could go in this in more detail in Q&A, but it is a very holistic approach to whole body healing. Her idea is that, or her philosophy is that we are made by God by design, and then part of the design is our body can heal itself. And I would use that approach in my counseling of patients as well, where I would tell them, look, when you have a cut on your arm and you put a Band-Aid on, does the Band-Aid tell the cut how to heal itself? No, not at all. It's just we don't stare at it. Once we put the Band-Aid on, our body knows how to heal that cut. And that's the same thing that she's saying. So we still need conventional medicine, but in many ways, why we are in the problem that we are with chronic illness and how sick everybody is because we went away from lifestyle, and how to get back to health is the same old thing, lifestyle. So one other resource one other thing I researched along the way was a smoothie that to start our day off right and just get all the best nutrition we can. Joe and I drink this smoothie every day. It is a green smoothie. We do that because with how much we were working, we figured, why not start off our day, cram in all the best nutrients we can get from the beginning of the day, and then if we don't get a chance to eat, or we eat poorly the rest of the day, at least we've started off with the best stuff in our body. So I do have that in the back as well for you guys. Last thing, autophagy. This basically means self-eating. So it's what this talks about is what's going on in the cell. We, over time, just like if we don't take care of our house, it'll get messy and the garbage won't get taken out, etc. That happens inside of our cells too. So autophagy is where our body, our cells, decide, okay, at some point we've got to take care of all the toxins and basically the garbage in the cell and boot it out. So this can be triggered by fasting. So you may have heard more lately about intermittent fasting. Dr. Jason Fung, this is a great resource. His book guides people through fasting, but very briefly, intermittent fasting can trigger autophagy. There are many other benefits, though, to intermittent fasting. But one example of doing it is basically saying, every day I'm going to eat. It's just going to be during this 6 to 8 hour period of time. That way, your body gets a really good break in between 16 to 18 hours of continuous fast. Most of that time we're sleeping, so it's very doable. We just have to organize it, and that allows your body to trigger itself. So just note that diabetics need to be monitored closely for obvious reasons. Why I bring this up here is because it's good for lifestyle measures, but also for people who may be dealing with post-vaccine injury. Autophagy can help package the degraded pathogens inside of our cells and basically detoxify the body. All right, and okay, just one last thought, what this is all about. It's about our kids. So I love this guy. If standing up for your kids burns a bridge, I have matches, we ride at dawn. And that's what it's all about. This is really what it's all about.
Thank y'all so much for having me this evening. My name is Chris Alexander. My organization, and now Danielle Walker's organization, one of them is the Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, LACAG. And what we do as of about July of 2022 is we expose what we call affectionately the rhinos in our state legislature that had contributed so much to the damage and the destruction of our freedom over the past 3 years. Many of the items of legislation that Representative Amade was talking about earlier were killed in our legislature by rhino Republicans who had run on a platform of constitutional conservatism only to be elected to the legislature and then begin to do the bidding of big self-enriching special interests that now control them. And under our Constitution, the way our founding fathers set it up, under the 9th and 10th Amendments of the Constitution, our legislature is supposed to be a stone wall against federal tyranny. When the federal government encroaches beyond the power granted to it under the Constitution, our legislature, under the vision of our founding fathers, is supposed to be a stone wall that asserts our sovereignty and our rights in the face of that tyranny. But because we have too many globalist rhinos serving in the state legislature right now that are busying themselves undermining good legislators like Mike Facey and Beryl Amade and Kathy Edmonston and others, we're not getting the results that we deserve. And so my organization routinely and regularly exposes the actual voting record of these rhinos in our legislature and is working diligently to defeat them and replace them with constitutional conservatives after they have signed a sworn commitment on any number of issues as to what they're going to do once they get there. We've been successful in a couple of races already. We have several other very significant races that we're focused on October 14th. And if things go the way they can go, is that Stephen Swiber sitting right there?
Yes, sir.
I didn't even realize you were here, but I want to recognize Stephen Swiber, who is one of the candidates that we have endorsed. We just finished, I wanted to tell you all about the State of Freedom podcast. I was going to tell you about that later, but now I'm going to tell you about it now because Danielle Walker and I also co-host something called the State of Freedom, which is a rapidly expanding statewide podcast that elevates the voice of constitutional conservatism. And we have candidates on the show. We have incumbents on the show. Several of the people on this panel have been on our show already. We want to have one more on or a couple more on very, very soon. But it's the State of Freedom, and Stephen Swiber, who is running for state representative down in this area, was one of our recent guests. Very, very impressed with the depth of knowledge that he has shown on the issues that are really matter. His understanding is not superficial. It's a profound understanding of the issues that really affect us. And he's running for state senate. You know, there's an old saying that the Louisiana State Senate is where good legislation often goes to die. And that's very, very true. We work hard to get items of legislation through the House. I know Beryl can attest to that. Senator Facey may be willing to attest to that as well. But it gets over to the Senate, where the good old boy club, of which Senator Facey is not routinely a member, I will say, and he always fights hard for us, but it gets over there and good legislation dies. If people like Stephen Swiber are elected to the state senate in Louisiana, the culture in the state senate will be changed, and we will begin the process of returning our legislature to the people. So I wanted to mention you by name and wish you the very best in the last week of your race. To get to the point for which I was really asked to speak this evening is, in what ways did the government violate our constitutional rights during COVID? I feel like I could just say 3 words and then hand the mic to my good friend Brandon Troskelater. The answer is 4 words: in every way imaginable. in every way imaginable. The Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution says that the government cannot basically invade our privacy, no unreasonable seizure or search of our person. These vaccine mandates are a seizure of the person. These mask mandates are a seizure of the person. In order to violate that Fourth Amendment right that we have, you have to have probable cause showing that a crime has been committed. I don't know that anybody in here who was reluctant to get a vaccine or wear a mask or get locked down in your homes week after week was committing a crime. But the government nonetheless, so these lockdowns, these vaccine mandates, these quarantines were all a violation of the Fourth Amendment. They were also a violation of the 14th Amendment, the Due Process Clause, because they involved a deprivation of your liberty and your freedom without due process of law. Clear violation of the 14th Amendment. Article 1, Section 5 of the Louisiana Constitution, entitled Invasion of Privacy. Nowhere does the Louisiana Constitution authorize the governor to impose these types of restrictions on our freedom ever under any circumstances. He was proceeding under what's called the Emergency Powers Act in Louisiana. That's what he purported to base his authority on, everything that he did. The Louisiana Constitution, the Emergency Powers Act, does nowhere grant him. Woody Jenkins, who's a friend of ours from Baton Rouge, helped to draft the Emergency Powers Act. And I can tell you by reading it and also by talking to former Representative Jenkins, nowhere in the Emergency Powers Act is the governor authorized to force people to get vaccines, authorized to force people to walk around in masks, to be locked up in their homes, to get their businesses shuttered. Nowhere is that authorized in the Constitution. And everything that he did was a violation of our freedom and our liberty. I'll tell you also about the Nuremberg Code, which is really an international law that the Allied forces and Allied countries after World War II came to make sure that nothing like the Holocaust ever happens again. And one of the fundamental pillars of the Nuremberg Code that's applicable to all free countries is that consent, voluntary consent, is an essential requirement for any government before anybody has to take any kind of medical procedure, vaccine, or anything. You have to have voluntary consent to do it. So all of these draconian actions were a violation of the Nuremberg Code as well. It is extraordinary to me when I look at what happened to us that we allowed to happen. And the warning I would give everyone, because I do agree with Senator Facey that this very well could come down again. And the next time this comes down, we have to make a commitment to one another that we are not going to comply with any more government tyranny. There are far more of us than there are of them. They want to keep us divided against each other. We have to make a commitment that we're not going to comply, that we're going to resist. In the great tradition of Mahatma Gandhi and Henry David Thoreau and Martin Luther King, all of whom elevated the art of civil disobedience and were successful in pursuing civil disobedience, because that's really what we're talking about here. We're not the lawless ones. We are simply going to resist the lawless acts of our government. The last thing that I want to encourage everyone to do, please subscribe to the State of Freedom. We're expanding across the state, elevating the voice of constitutional conservatism, and each day we're gaining new and new members so that we can continue to expose these rhino legislators and return our legislature
to the citizens. They have all the constitutional authority that they need to protect us, but we need the right people there. We need more Kathy Edmonstons, more Valerie Hodges, more Mike Facey's, more Beryl Amadeus. Frankly, we need more Stephen Swibers in there. And if we do that, we have all the protection we need so that we can protect you. God bless you and thank you.
Thank y'all for having me tonight. Y'all having a good time? Y'all enjoy it? Yeah. I'm gonna be better than that now. Come on. I'm gonna start off by giving a quote. I talk about Ronald Reagan a lot. I'm traveling all over the state right now campaigning for Secretary of State, and I talk about Ronald Reagan all the time. And what I want y'all to think about this while I'm giving the rest of my story about COVID. What Ronald Reagan said in one of his acceptance speeches, his inaugural speech, was that we are a people with a government, not a government with people, that all the power that our government has been freely given to them by the people. So I wanted to let that sink in a little bit while I tell you my story, and I'm going to go back to that at the end. But I tell people all the time I'm in the customer service business, and I happen to sell groceries. When COVID rolled around, I had over 500 employees in 16 grocery stores across South Louisiana and into Mississippi. And life was good. Everything was normal. Our fill rate, when we would order things from our warehouse, our fill rate was 99.8%. So basically, we would get almost 100% of whatever we would order, we would put it on the shelves and take care of our customers, and tens of thousands of customers that we had come in every single day. I never forget, we heard about this coronavirus coming through. And over here in South Louisiana, it was kind of a joke. It wouldn't last long. It would be here for a week or two. Go drink a Corona beer and it'll all be over with and it'll be good, right? It was kind of a joke. And I never forget going to the governor's prayer breakfast one morning. I was with my kid's principal, Parkview Baptist in Baton Rouge, and they invited me to go. And then when we left that prayer breakfast, our governor shut down our state, put in the vaccine, put in the mask mandates, shut down business, dozens and dozens of businesses, restaurants and bar rooms, and just tons of businesses around the state. He shut that down. And we had numerous amount of challenges in the grocery business. Our fill rate, as I mentioned, was almost 100%. It had gotten as low as 25%. Do y'all remember those days when you had to call all the grocery stores to see if they had bread in stock, see if they had canned goods in stock? Remember those days when you would go in and you had 10 and 20-foot sections and it was one item? Y'all remember the run on toilet paper? Yeah, it was crazy times. You know, again, all these restaurants were shut down, and you know we were scrambling to get supplies to take care of our customers. We typically buy from a handful of vendors, and all of a sudden we had people from around the country calling us, and we were calling them just to get product. Again, we were buying everything at the restaurants that they previously were taking, and we were buying that product just to be able to service our customers. It was truly, truly challenging times during that period, but it ended up getting worse. So you had a lot of people during that time, specifically some elder people, decided to not work and to stay home to protect themselves for their health, which was fine. But then our president came out with a employer vaccine mandate. That vaccine mandate said if you had over 100 employees, that you had to force your employees to take a vaccine or you had to terminate them. What an overreach of our federal government. What an injustice to not only the employers, but what an injustice to the people. How sad is that? We were looking at, we estimated that we would lose 35 to 50% of our employees already shorthanded. We were already massively understaffed just to try to get the groceries on the shelves. And now we have the President of the United States telling employees we had to force our employees to do this mandate or terminate them and fire them. So again, we were already understaffed. We're looking at losing 35 to 50% more. And again, a massive injustice to the American people. And so I was extremely concerned about this. My 500 employees were broken up over 16 stores, 17, 18 entities, whatever the case. And there was a lot of questions swirling around whether or not this was going to affect me. Lo and behold, my secretary had written our congressman to come visit. She'd written all of our congressmen to come and tour our stores. Out of the blue, our congressman, Garrett Grace, came and toured my store in Gonzales. He asked me how he can help me, and I told him that they needed to stay out of my business. You know, and furthermore, I said, I want to know one thing. Is this vaccine mandate, if it comes down, is it going to affect me? Because I don't have more than 100 employees in any one entity. And he said, yes, the inner workings of that vaccine mandate will be common ownership, which I'm the sole owner of all of our entities. So sure enough, I said, Congressman, I said, this is a massive government overreach. This is wrong on every single level. What can we do about this? He said, it's going to take somebody to stand up. And I said, well, I'm going to stand up. This is not right for my employees, and it's not right for my businesses. And he said, do you know the good people over at the Pelican Institute in Baton Rouge? And I said, yeah, by the way, I did. I took a class over there, a year-long class with Stephen Swiber. I've known him about 4 years now. He's been a good friend of mine. And I said, I know him and I know him well. He goes, I suggest that you might want to give him a call. So as soon as our congressman was out the door, I called our good folks over at the Pelican Institute, and I said, if this vaccine mandate comes down, I'm going to stand up for my business, and I'm going to stand up for my employees, because this is not right. It's a massive government overreach. And John Kay, the fellow on the other end of the phone, he said, Mr. Trostler, are you telling me that you want to sue the President of the United States? And I said, John Kay, I want to stand up for my businesses, and I want to stand up for my people, and if that's what it takes, then that's what it takes. So he's like, okay, we're going to do it. What I thought I was doing in that moment, I thought I was going to be filing a lawsuit alongside tens of thousands of other business owners across the country. In my view, in my eyes, it was such a massive government overreach, just flagrant on so many different levels, that something had to be done. I ended up being the first of only 6 private businesses in the entire country. And I'm going to touch back on that at the end of this conversation as well. I was the first person of only 6 private individuals, private businesses across the country. I was quite shocked at that, to say the least. But we filed suit that they officially came out with the mandate on Wednesday. On Thursday morning, we were the first ones in federal court. We filed that lawsuit. And, you know, again, I thought it would be one of tens of thousands. 2 days later, I was in Arkansas with my 2 young kids, teaching them how to deer hunt. And the Fifth Circuit awarded us an immediate nationwide injunction halting the vaccine mandate. From there, everything moved really quick. Again, we got a nationwide injunction at the Fifth Circuit. Of course, President Biden immediately appealed that case. And within 60 days, we were on the steps of the United States Supreme Court. Again, I did it because it was the right thing to do. Never expected any attention, media, or anything like that. Laura knows, Miss Lenore knows me probably better than anybody in the room. I don't like being behind the microphone or behind the camera. But we were on every media channel in the country, every radio station, it seems like in every state. But we were in the Supreme Court within 60 days. And I'll tell you what was encouraging is I heard from thousands of people all over the country. I got phone calls and text messages and emails from every state in our country and from many countries around the world. But one thing that was disappointing was I didn't hear from a single business owner in the country at all. Not a single one. And I'll never forget a conversation that I had. I was playing in a charity golf tournament just weeks after we got our nationwide injunction. And I asked the CEO of a very large company here in Louisiana. And I said, hey, did you hear that, you know, I stopped that vaccine mandate? It's affecting everybody here at this charity golf tournament. It affects as a grocery event. It affects every single one of them. Yeah, I heard about it. Man, you got any questions? I'd appreciate your support. You know, why aren't you getting involved? And he told me that he was waiting to see if me and my businesses crash and burn first. Folks, we got to do better than that. We got to do better than that. We have to unite and stand together. But anyway, in 60 days, we were on the steps of the United States Supreme Court in Washington. We won that case 6-3, overwhelmingly. We won on the basis that Chris was talking about at different levels of the Constitution. We sued on the grounds of the 10th Amendment and the 4th Amendment. and also against OSHA itself, that was the wrong avenue. OSHA's supposed to protect the workplace. You go to work, you can put your hard hat on, and when you leave, you can take your hard hat off. But you can't take a vaccine out of your body. And we won overwhelmingly, really on all three cases of the 10th Amendment, the 4th Amendment. I also believe that no politician belongs in my business, including the President of the United States. And I don't belong in the medical decisions of my employees. That is not my role. I am not the vaccine police. I'm not the mask police. The medical decision, if you want to take a vaccine, that's between you, your family, and your doctor, not your boss. So anyway, it was an honor of a lifetime to be able to stand up for my businesses, to stand up for my employees, to stand up for the American worker. There's many, many publications out there that estimate that we saved over 80 million jobs across the United States. And again, an honor of a lifetime, and extremely proud of what we did there. I mentioned about it earlier that Ronald Reagan said that we are a people with a government and vice versa, and Chris talked about it, that power has been freely given. What I feel is the biggest threat to our civil liberties in our country today is that we, the people, have freely given that power to our government. We have freely given to them. So Ronald Reagan also said that when the people do too little, the elected often do way too much. And I think everybody in the room can admit, especially going through COVID, that our government done way too much. Way too much. But understand, we gave them that power. Way too much apathy in our country. Way too much appeasement in our country. You know, half of our people are even registered to vote, and then you got 20 and 30% turnout of that number to even vote. We have given that power to the politicians. We have to stand together, and fight and stand up for our freedoms. You know, I'm extremely appreciative of everybody that's in this room tonight. But there's no reason that this building should be packed tonight. This should be a standing room only in this place tonight. We have to get involved in the process. Not long after my lawsuit, after we won at the Supreme Court, I had lunch with our Attorney General. He also sued for the medical freedom vaccine mandate, and they lost. I said, Mr. Attorney General, why did you lose? It's basically the same case as mine. Why did you lose? Because they didn't have a single person stand up and be a plaintiff. Not a single person. We can do better than that. We can do better than that. The last thing I'm going to say, you know, that's the rest of the story on COVID. The last thing I'm going to say is I'm running for Secretary of State. I'm running because we have awful elections here in Louisiana. Awful elections. There's no accountability and there's no transparency at all. And I'm running to restore the power back to the people. And I'm going to do everything that I can to be transparent and accountable and restore that power back to the people. But make no mistake, it is your responsibility to take that power back. I'm going to give you every single opportunity possible to take that power back. But please, get involved. Get involved. Ronald Reagan said, the last time I quote Ronald Reagan tonight, and I'm going to shut up. But he said in that great speech in the 60s, he implored people to do your best. Do your best for your kids and your grandkids to protect this great country that we have. And that's what I'm asking you to do. Do your best. Get involved in something. Tell somebody else to come. Ask your neighbors to come. Ask your families. Next time the people, this is a fantastic organization. There's organizations for everything I found out campaigning statewide. But this is a group right here that is involved. They're doers. They're not just talkers. They're doers. They take action. But get your neighbors involved. Invite your family. And take back that power that we, the people, freely gave many, many years ago. Thanks again for having me tonight.
Chris, the Supreme Court struck down Biden's tuition forgiveness plan, yet he has resurrected that plan. This seems to be an overt challenge to the rule of law. Will anyone hold him accountable And what kind of recourse do we have as citizens?
Well, I would say,
Yeah, use the microphone.
David, our first recourse is to get him out of office as soon as possible. So much of this, and I wanted to mention this earlier, so much of this, unfortunately, they should be, but judicially, at least until it gets to a very high court, and people have suffered tremendously, there is no relief in the courts, unfortunately now, because for a variety of reasons. Most of the solution to our problems is going to be at the ballot box. We've got to make sure that we're putting the right people in office who represent our interests faithfully. The second point is Biden is lawless. There's no question about that. The U.S. Supreme Court has ruled on the tuition forgiveness. They have ruled that it's unconstitutional. And Biden will continue to press the issue, continue to press the envelope until he is slapped down again against, I guess. But fortunately, the U.S. Supreme Court, last time I checked, has the final word on things. But he is always trying to find a way to violate the rule of law. So this is really not shocking, not surprising. But I would say, to answer your question, our solution is to get him and people like him out of office as quickly as possible.
Pastor Tony Stell is an example of a tremendous patriot who took a lot of arrows, if you want to call it that. FBI targeted him along with the state of Louisiana and other law agencies. He filed a civil lawsuit after the Supreme Court ruled in his favor on the mask and, curtailing church services. What is the status of that civil suit?
I don't know what the status of his suit is, but I can tell you now that there's no question that, and I think he should be successful on that suit. If he's not, I would consider it a gross miscarriage of justice for two reasons. There's no question the government was acting under color, what we call under color of law, in violating his rights. They were acting in their official capacity. And secondly, there's no doubt that his fundamental constitutional rights were violated. And they acted with deliberate indifference to his rights. And those are the ingredients for a successful lawsuit for constitutional violations. And I agree with you. I think it's a disgrace what happened to him.
Assuming a jury verdict in his favor, how many dump trucks will it take to haul the money back to his chosen bank?
Hopefully a lot, because for this reason, because he's alleging a constitutional violation, he gets what's called, if a jury awards it, what's called not only compensatory damages, but punitive or punishment damages, which are damages designed to deter the conduct in the future. And so what do you got to have to deter that conduct? You got to hit them very, very hard where it hurts in the pocketbook. So I hope it's a lot of dump trucks.
Truly a guiding light as far as faith is concerned. He was one of the few faith leaders in the country to not close his doors to his parishioners. And he was arrested 33 times. And he refused. And as a result, he has a congregation that has had no COVID deaths. We will get an update on where the ruling stands, and then we'll get an update to We the People so they can share it on their social media, because that is one brave soul that needs to be celebrated, and he is caring for the one freedom that's the most important one of ours.
Hello, my name is Ed Lorge. I'm a simple one-man business, lovely individual. Thank each of you for being willing to put the target on your back and walk around. Thank you, Bud. Thank you, Vicki. Thank all of you for being here today. Thank you for all that you've been doing and are doing. Being a little futuristic in my fears, and I have a lot of fears right now. I fear what's going on with the interest rates. I fear what's going on with the insurance rates. My homeowner's insurance gone from 4,000 to basically almost 8,000 a year for homeowner's insurance. I know there's a lot of people here that are under the thumb of fear of being able to pay the bills, and so here we are. But I have a futuristic, much bigger fear that I worry about, and that is about this immigration problem that we have going on. Yesterday I saw in the news all of these Palestinian young men that were mounting their forces against Israel, and all of them were very brave, strong, healthy young men, and they're ready to go fight and kill all those Jews over there. Now, being of Jewish descent myself, that puts a little bit of don't like that. Okay, so with that, when I see all of these young people coming across the border, I see similar, if not almost exactly the same person that just coming across the border. And that is young, strong, healthy young men who look like, for me, soldiers. And all of this, these mounting, I saw a few days ago in the news, the mayor of New York City says we're broke. We're just completely out. We can't afford, feeding all of these illegal immigrants that are here in New York City. We feed them, we house them, we take care of their medical, all of this. So we got this massive number of young, strong, healthy men coming into our country. And it's like, well, what is the purpose? Why is the government bringing these people into our country? And the primary fear that I have, just like in Israel right now, where we've got a massive number of young Palestinian men coming to fight against them, I'm thinking, well, logically, it only brings up the question, are they bringing in soldiers to fight against us? And this is very fearful. I mean, if you arm these millions and millions of young men, strong young men, and here we are, totally, for the most part, totally unorganized, unprotected, easily manipulated. My question to all of you is, in a lot of that little bit of information, and each of you can answer it however you wish, in the event of a massive social crisis of whatever cause, whether it be hurricane or national disaster, whether it's massive chaos, is anybody thinking about that sort of thing? What could we possibly do to prepare for that sort of?
From the perspective of something that is not being advertised on mainstream media and
Could you speak a little louder, sweetheart?
yes, anybody can, more than welcome to jump in. The WHO, World Health Organization, is talking about a treaty. I'm sure they'll call it something other than a treaty by this point, May of 2024. And I'm going to speak in generalities because there's so many specifics. Most of these issues are so complicated and in so many different sectors that it's almost meant to be confusing by design. But ultimately, the idea is to have countries sign a treaty that will agree that if there is another pandemic, that they will all follow along the same basic, kind of like what Dr. Randy was talking about, is that you would have a standardized central organization that will tell the other countries what to do. One arm of that would be digital passports. Now, this is nothing certain, and it would potentially be years down the road. These are things that are being discussed, but you really have to search out the information because it is not on mainstream media. Because if it were, hopefully there would be a little bit of resistance or a lot of resistance. But May of 2024 apparently is when this is culminating to come to fruition. And then implementation could be a number of years. But one of the medical applications to this is, actually didn't spend any time on the slide that I had, but if the government is breaking constitutional rules to create an emergency, then they're going to create emergencies so they could break the law. So that's kind of the scenario that's going to be presented to us, is that we are being told that another pandemic is coming.
Yeah.
It seems like, I almost feel like a conspiracy theorist saying it, but I'm actually repeating the words of Fauci. Fauci says there is another pandemic coming. Bill Gates said there is another pandemic coming right around the corner. And they say within the next few years. In anticipation of this, the World Health Organization is trying to organize us so that we can be better protected for the greater good. And so should there be another pandemic or world emergency, then all the countries together would be essentially told what to do. And then a top-down. In fact, in one of those medical applications would be potentially a digital passport, where if you don't have the correct benchmarks checked off, then your movement around the world would be limited. So that's one application of this.
And I believe also it gives control to the World Health Organization, who is not elected by any of you, but is rather an organization that is operating independent of the people we put in office to put our rules and regulations in place. So we're essentially, should that pass, giving control to the WHO to rule how we as Americans should act in our own country, if I got that correct.
And a wonderful organization like We the People are great to look for information like that. We can all help collate that information, because it's not going to show up on mainstream media on how we could act. Doesn't exactly answer your question, but it's kind of the umbrella problem ahead of us. Yeah. We shouldn't fear it. We shouldn't live in fear, because Jesus already saved us. That's why we're up here. I mean, you were right. There is potentially a target on our backs. And that's what pastors felt, that they had death threats. And he pushed on.
Yes.
So, yeah, they pushed on. I mean, third arrest onwards, they had death threats. But 30 more arrests, and he pushed on. And look where he is. He's a guy in light. So.
Could we get the sheriff's thoughts on?
Hold on.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It was wide, so he covered a lot, but I think I can narrow it down pretty quick. All right, I'm probably louder than he is now, right? I don't like to sit down when I talk, so I'll make it pretty simple. Anybody's elected takes it over. You need to remember this, so I think it's going to cover your question and probably a lot. Support, defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of Louisiana. As an elected, we do not have the luxury to pick and choose what the hell we decide we're going to defend or not. It's all of it, period. So to answer your question, if there's government overreach in this parish, they got to come through me, and it's not happening, period. That's what you elected me for. You know, when I ran, they said you got to create separation between your opponent and I. Well, one of them was stopping government, big government, big government. I said, I'm a military guy that retired, and I'm here to support my people. My people is my constituents at Fairlawn Parish. That's what I was elected to do. So if we're going to be worried about government overreach, well, they got to kind of get through me. And I've had conversations with other elected officials. It's just not going to happen. I mean, I can tell you that they wanted to film a movie, and I'm going to tell you a story, so I'm going to tell you how this works. And if I cuss, I'll put a 25 cents in a pickle jar, because the Marine does come out from time to time. And I'm in a kind of a church facility. It's probably not good. So the bottom line was, they were filming a movie prior to the storm. And I think I told you this. They were filming a movie prior to the storm. And after the storm, they were ready to start filming again. I said, absolutely not. We're not shutting any roads down. They said, we were cleared by DOTD. I said, I don't give up. You know what? Who cleared it? It's not happening in my parish. If you want to do something good, start bringing supplies and helping our people. Then you'll do something good. But we're not going to shut no parish down to film a movie, especially on Highway 311. And a guy from Apple said, well, they try to grease the skids with me. Well, he's very good with the government. I said, I don't have a problem telling them to go, you know what, too, because it's not happening. And it didn't. So, bottom line is, if there's worry about overreach, we support defending the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of Louisiana as elected officials. And one line as any oath of office, I bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and I will not, well, I'm sorry, that's another part. I take this obligation freely without mental reservation or purpose of evasion. In other words, the hard line is the Constitution. And we're not going to evade or dissect what we pick, don't like or don't like. I do not like when somebody takes a knee on the flag, but it's their First Amendment right. It is what it is. I don't like it, but I have to defend everybody. And that's the bottom line. So we don't have the luxury to pick and choose when it comes to the Constitution. So the bottom line, we protect all, and that's what we're here to do. And if you're elected, ask your elected officials. Ms. Burrow had it right. She said, ask the questions, but how do you stand on the Constitution? Period. We don't get to pick and choose. You defend it all. Thank you.
I just wanted to say, Sheriff, I very much appreciate your comments. My good friend Jeff Travis, Sheriff, you probably know him up in St. Francisville. He's very much of a constitutional sheriff also, and I just am very inspired by your words. Thank you. And I wanted to add one other thing about the WHO deal and Biden with a treaty, the WHO. The last time I checked, the United States Constitution requires 2/3 of the United States Senate to ratify any purported treaty that our president wants to enter into. And I don't think that provision of our Constitution has been amended. And I don't think that President Biden has the constitutional authority to unilaterally amend that very important provision of our Constitution. The reason why our founding fathers did not give the president sole authority to enter into treaties with 4 other countries is because it was way, way too important. And if you look at the writings of the founding fathers, they said no possible way. This would be a potential for massive abuse, creating a dictator out of our president. Not only are we going to require Senate ratification, we're going to require that 2/3 of the Senate ratify any purported treaty. So I guarantee you this would be challenged constitutionally and probably struck down. Somebody needs to let President Biden know that.
You should insist from your congressmen and our senators, no more funding for the WHO, no more funding for the United Nations. It's time's up for those people because our money is funding the tyranny of this government.
My name is Warren Stewart. I'm the executive director of Terrebonne Churches United Food Bank here in Terrebonne. It's Tim. During COVID, the TCU Food Bank was very hard pressed and threatened by more than one state agency. That if we didn't comply with the bureaucratic mandates, we would have the risk of having the food bank taken over. You and I discussed this a little bit. And even though we are a private, nonprofit, Christian, non-governmental agency, since you hold different governmental authority, if such a situation occurs again, if TCU turned itself over to you as sheriff, could we have better protection and do the job in which God mandates us?
Well, I think we're working together in the food bank already, right?
Absolutely. Well, I don't think you realize, most of the people realize it was do this by the State Department of Health, or we can get the Board of Health in here, we'll shut you down, or we can get the state IRS or the state tax thing to shut you down. And we have more agencies than you have wherewithal to do. And I was really told that, guys. And so the 30,000 people we served was more important to us. So unfortunately, I asked my staff to comply with being jabbed, including myself, and it is one of the worst nightmares I ever asked. And I want to do it again. And Tim has said he would help me.
Absolutely, we've helped you before. Look, there's always going to be requirements, but we got to remember, a mandate is not a law. I'm law enforcement. So it's pretty simple. I mean, I said it during council, I said it numerous times, I'm not gonna be the mass police. I'm not gonna do those things. But however, you gotta look at, it's a double-sided edge, so when you look at personal businesses, if they choose, and they don't want people there, we have to respect private property and private business, what they choose. So, but we're not gonna go there, private business, or, you know, we're gonna enforce mass, so we can't go in there, if they just want them to leave, then they leave. The worst thing that can happen to somebody, if they don't wanna wear a mask on their property, they can leave, they may be charged trespassing, but it's nothing to do with the mask. So, when it comes to that, but we're not there, out there making people wear masks, we're just not gonna do it. And we didn't do it before, we're not gonna do it now. I mean, we got other things to deal with that's out there, and much bigger issues to deal with than that. So I'm not gonna bog my officers down on dealing with those type of things.
I live in St. Mary Parish. In fact, my associate, Bill Willett with me, we're part of the new tri-parish. We the people, St. Mary, Fujian, terrible. Last month, we hosted a candidate forum for Senate District 21. That was our first event, so we're so glad that we got this out. But my question is first of all, it's a jurisdictional question. Well, maybe Beryl or someone, can answer this. When it comes to the public library system in the state of Louisiana, is the jurisdictional dynamic, is it parish? How much authority does the state have over the library association?
Each library has a certain board that runs it. There are parish libraries, there are city libraries. So the governing entity, if it's a public library, the governing entity is whatever entity created and funds that particular library. As far as the state has a state library. It's in Baton Rouge, right across the street from the Capitol. But the state doesn't run your parish or your city libraries locally. I know that the big issue that's been discussed about libraries in the past year or two has been the books with strange content. And those books are supposed to be, they're supposed to meet the state requirements concerning obscenity, but we have found that there's a loophole apparently in our obscenity laws because it says that schools are exempt. Now, I believe the exemption was written in before the modern definition of obscenity, but that's a whole other discussion. But for the libraries, the entity that created and funds the library is the entity that runs the library. And in almost all cases, it's not the state.
Well, here's where I'm going with the question. And I'm just my way of thinking, it could be totally off. But as a state legislator, if I were a state legislator, I'm thinking that while that's everything you just said is accurate, there should be some kind of a statute that requires the libraries to have in other words, they've got a list of these books that should be flagged for minors, and that the state librarian or the local librarians look at that list. A person comes up and says, "Okay, can you show me your ID for this book to check it out or to look at it inside the library?" I don't know if you're familiar with Karen England or Sarah Gonzalez, but these two people have gotten before school boards to read these books, and the content is just unbelievable. It is totally unbelievable how bad it is. So the point is that if you take a child and reads that, you don't have to have pictures. Just read the text and the way it's written and so forth, and it will mentally and emotionally rape that child. We have to have something to stop this. Yes.
I can kind of tell you that we tried getting some bills passed to do that. But the problem is one of the things is we look at how we vote on the floor. Actually, we don't have statistics that's let out on how we vote on committee. And so a lot of these good bills are killed in committee. And so that's what's so important to find out, how are the legislature's doing in committee. I've had many a good bills killed in committee that never got to the floor. And so that's why we gotta figure out who we want up there to get these bills proposed, and then maybe we can do something about it, because I'll go along with you. We gotta stop this content from getting to our children, just like I had to fight to stop the mutilization of our children when I got the bill back into committee. When that bill was vetoed, I had ran that bill 2 years ago on child mutilization. I couldn't get it out of committee. So here we go. The House did a great job getting it through and voted on. We get it to the Senate, and the same senator that killed my bill in that committee killed this one. So I had to go to the Senate president and tell him I had to get it in another committee. And it was, oh, we don't do that in the Senate. Oh, we're going to do it this time.
Can you say who's killed it?
Yeah, Fred Mills. I can say it. I mean, he's on record killing it. So it was a big battle. Got it in another committee. My Senate president told me, you show me you got the votes on the floor, and we'll see what we can do. Well, I had plenty of votes on the floor. We got it through. Now, the thing is when we had it on the floor, and Fred and another senator got up, and I knew I had the votes, but I just couldn't live with what they were saying. So God hit me and said, you got to get up and say what you have to say. So I did that, knowing I still had the votes. But at least I got it out in the public and what we go through to try to get a good bill passed. And then after that, I get a death threat from a LSU teacher as a voicemail, and had to go through that situation. Now, the thing about it is LSU said it was a threat, but the state police said it wasn't a threat. So he didn't get nothing done to him. But guess who the bosses of the state police are? The governor. And that's the bill that I had overturned that he vetoed. So it's so important in committee that we got to get it right in committee. So everyone needs to get involved. When I ran that bill 2 years earlier, I had 402 red cards against me and 2 green cards. I had no support. But at least the House did a great job 2 years later, because we saw the problem it was causing. And that's what I'm saying, is we just need some help. We need y'all's help. We need y'all's support. When bills like this come to committee, we need you there. Because I broke the record having 402 red cards against a certain bill. There's never been that many red cards against me. So everyone come out against that, wanting to keep the kids being able to get puberty blockers and everything else. But I had 2 green cards. So that's why it's so important, and that's what I like to say. To help you out, we got to get it out of committee.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Just one last comment. We've got a law in the books that says you can't sell cigarettes to it unless they show their ID. But we don't have a law that requires a librarian to say, show me your ID before you can check out this book. There needs to be a book list, number one, and on that list, they have to show their ID. Can that happen?
I totally agree. We're trying to get some of that stuff through committee. So let's get the right people elected on the 14th, and we'll go from there.
Mike, let me respond very briefly to the committee deal. I don't know if Danielle Walker is still here or not. Well, yes, she's right there. I want to let everybody here know that we cover meticulously on the State of Freedom on our podcast exactly how many of these great items of legislation are killed in committee very, very secretly. And I don't know of any other organization in the state of Louisiana that focuses microscopically on what occurs in committee, because that's where these legislators kill things, as Mike said, but they don't want their fingerprints on it because they know they can't come back over here and explain it to you. And that's why they very often vote against good bills in committee. And if they survive committee, despite their vote, They get on the House floor, and guess what happens? They'll vote for it on the full floor because they know your constituents are going to know about it there, but they tried to kill it earlier. So I just want to let y'all know that the State of Freedom is exposing these rhinos for what they are doing in committee on these important items of legislation. So that's yet another reason why I encourage you to subscribe to the State of Freedom, because we're blowing it across the state.
Yes. Let me address very quickly. You heard Brandon say, return power to the people. You heard that centralization leads to corruption. The library, your parish library board is likely elected. If not elected, some of the members may be appointed. They are accountable to you, the voters. You need not look to these folks to take the power back over your local library. You should know who you're voting for. Our adversaries are highly organized against us. They are selecting candidates. They don't need to interview them. Do you know how they select these candidates for your local school board? That they're going to run from national organizations. They go on their social media. If they look at their social media, they're going to have them run. They'll fund them, and you'll never know what happened. That's why we have library board members who do not respond to the constituents. It's because they were not elected by you. And so take library board votes very seriously and get involved in your local library and your school board, by the way.
Well, first I just want to thank what Sheriff said about defending the Constitution, especially in light of the fact that some of the leading law schools are now indoctrinating the law students that the Constitution is irrelevant and outdated. And so I don't know what kind of lawyers we're ending up with from those schools, but the Constitution is, next to the Bible, it's our salvation for our country. But I wanted to address Dr. Steve because I don't want to run out of time before we get to, Dr. Steve is a local physician, and he has taken up a strong stand to treat COVID, progressively the right way, I guess. So if somebody gets sick and they're afraid, and they, if they go, maybe it's not you, maybe it's another doctor who tells them, you better do this and you better do that, and how do they proceed? How do they get to the bottom of it, or should they come see you? Like, what advice would you have for families and parents in that situation?
Fortunately, I'll just let everyone know, there's 4 pharmacies that throughout the pandemic stocked ivermectin for everyone, even with threats to have their license pulled from the pharmacy board. In total, Lloyd's, Broadmoor, and Wolf's continue to provide it. And it'd be a good idea to support them because throughout the entire pandemic, they would fulfill everything. We've been treating it all along. It wasn't advertised. I kind of kept it on the radar because they threatened to pull our license. I mean, not mine in particular, but anyone who was writing for it. And we probably saw well over 3,000 or more people. We'll get anyone in with COVID who wants to be seen. There really hasn't been much of an issue recently. I think I saw 10 people in 2 weeks about a month ago, and then it just stopped. Fortunately, people aren't getting sick. It seems like it's more hype to create fear than it is reality. And when they started saying hospitals are getting full again and all this stuff started ramping up, the university started mandating masks and schools started putting that in, I don't know where they're seeing the numbers because it's not down here and it's not really showing up anywhere. I think most of it is fear mongering just to help keep pushing this down. And it's amazing that it started as soon as this last presidential election cycle started again. It has probably more to do with creating enough fear so they can start manipulating the rules again on voting. I mean, I just don't see it happening for a medical reason at this point. But if anyone's concerned, we can get them in and treat them. There are a handful of physicians that are treating it. I can't name them because I've heard of a couple. Most are afraid still to do it. I don't have hospital privileges, so I don't have any threats from hospitals to pull my privileges. So, you know, it is out there. It's not as lethal as it's been, and the treatment it works. It works for the flu too. So if anyone needs to get treated, ivermectin does work. We can get you prescriptions if you need it.
I'd like to tag on to that question while you're speaking, sir. It seems as the physicians that have been treating us for years, all of a sudden have a fear to speak out against what the public policy is. And it is, and I may be wrong about this, but it's my belief that they're being held hostage by the corporations who own the hospitals where they have the privileges. So that if they don't go in line with where their privileges are, then they no longer have privileges, which means they can't see patients. Does that ring a bell or not off base?
I think the threat to the livelihood of the physicians is real, and it's been there from the beginning. A lot of them have hospital-based practices, and if you didn't follow the hospital guidelines and the federal guidelines, they would pull your privileges. And it was happening in many states. My board certification, I got a letter from a board certified OBGYN. I got a letter from the American Board of OBGYNs. If I said anything against the stand on vaccines that they took, they would pull my board certification. So I didn't put anything on social media because that's what they were looking at. And they went through and they did pull a lot of board certifications. The last time I was on the panel, I made some comment and then realized it's all being videoed and thought they'd come back after me for that. They've kind of backed off from now, but when you look at it, the American Board of OBGYNs got $20 million apparently from NIH or someone to push the vaccines on pregnant women and everyone. All the major medical boards were pushing it on physicians, and they were threatening to pull their licenses or their board certifications. States were threatening to pull licenses. California passed a law. If you said anything against the state stand, it was grounds to lose your license. They just pulled that last week, I think. So the threat's been there all along, and it happened to a lot of physicians.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to get that out to the public so they would hear, but because, you know, you go to a doctor that you've trusted for years and all of a sudden, for some reason, he's just taken a complete about face, and there's a reason behind that. And I wanted to.
It's not stopping either. Terrebonne General and all of its related practices, all of the practices that are owned by Terrebonne General mandate that if you didn't get the flu vaccine by October 1st, you have to wear a mask. As a medical practitioner,
It's not stopping here. She said that the Terrebonne General has mandated that if you don't get the flu vaccine by a certain date, that they have to wear masks to be able to work in the hospital.
So the other thing about the hospital is you have to realize is they got paid by day for every person that was in there with COVID. And it was not a small amount. We look at $3,000 to $5,000 a day as federal bonus money for caring for COVID people. And I saw it was like $30,000 to $50,000 if you got an event. And then on top of that, when they killed you, I'm sorry, they didn't kill you, they wanted to die. They got another $3,000 to $5,000 bonus. So the money was huge. Every person that ended up not in the hospital could cost them $50,000 to $100,000 in federal bonus money. So around the country, the hospitals were turning in physicians to the state boards that were actually treating them. So, I mean, this is what you're up against when you're dealing with this. And people didn't realize how bad it had gotten. So if you're treating it and you wanted to be able to keep treating it, you had to do it quietly.
David Poiron from Lafayette Parish. Yeah. The FBI has a nationwide initiative to provide training to sheriffs. I want to address this to your sheriff here. What is the nature of these arrangements? What kind of obligations is the sheriff committing in order to receive this training? And do you see it as undermining the sheriff's accountability to his local community?
Well, I went to an FBI school when I first took office, and I can see sometimes they put different things out or trying to say what's going on. And I'll give you an example. They had one, they were talking about sensitivity training and sensitivity, and I'm like, I'm just gonna put my hand on it. I said, law enforcement, you learn to have thick skin, and I really don't care, if our law enforcement officers get their feelings hurt, because the fact is, they were talking about different orientations, if you would, and an officer was called a bad name and he was very intimidated, or his feelings was hurt. And I'm like, good God, where are you, law enforcement at? But and all I said was like, look, I really don't care, as long as my guys go to work and do their job. I really don't care. And got some guy from the bottom, whatever you said, I agree. And so there was some good things about technology that was there, but it didn't cost anything. I mean, as a matter of fact, they paid for the plane ticket for us to go to training. I didn't go to their 12-week academy and went through a 2-week thing that was 1 week, and then 4 months later I went for another week. But it was definitely it was more about the technology and what's out there that's actually good to help in our day-to-day jobs.
In the event of a crisis, do you see the FBI trying to subvert the authority of the sheriff, have them report?
Not in my parish.
Similar to what FEMA has done to state?
No, not in my parish. I mean, that's bottom line is it kind of goes back to the Constitution. Support and defend. Buck stops with me as far as Constitution. I mean, the way I see it, if I feel there's somebody coming here that's going to be unconstitutional to our people, then the buck stops with me. They're going to have to come through me first. And it's not going to happen. Look, we work with different government entities from drugs and a lot of things that we're fighting that battle every day. But there's no overstepping of anybody bounds with Constitution. It's in line with what we're doing as far as what the law allows us to do. So there's nothing out there, but if I felt there was something unconstitutional they're trying to do to our people or anything, it's just not happening. I mean, that's how it works.
My name is Sharita Andricott, and I'm hoping that I don't get too nervous, but I came here because I was really interested in about the lockdowns. And you guys really made me feel better about it. I want to thank you for that. But my question is really for the audience. Do I look like a pedophile? I work at the Terrebonne Parish Library, and I'm proud to work there, but that's what I've been called with people who supported the bill that was passed. The problem with the bill was it wasn't the sexual explicit stuff. That's how they got the door open. The stuff was with the LGBT material on the shelf. But they couldn't get the LGBT stuff off the shelf, but they could if they came through the back door saying the sexual explicit stuff. So when you pass a bill that restricts what people can read, things like Harry Potter would have never been on our shelf because it would have taught witchcraft to your children. Judy Blume would not be in our shelves because she uses the word breast. There's a lot of books that you're not going to find on our shelf because our librarians are too afraid to put them on our shelf. And with that being added, the library has always had a policy that if you didn't like something on our shelf, you could fill out a form, go in front of our library board, and state your case. And we have removed books that people have found offensive. And we do not peddle porn to young children. And we do not have porn in the young children's section. Children are getting porn off their phones, in their video games. The library is used by African American people, white people, poor people, especially down the Bayou. That's their assets. You get the government into our library and you're going to start seeing changes that maybe you guys won't like. And that's just all I have to say. I have to defend the Terrebonne Parish Library because we work hard and we are not pedophiles. Peddling porn.
Well, we've gone past time, gratefully, and again, I just want to thank everybody for attending tonight. I want to thank our panel for sharing tonight, and let's give them a round and yourself a round of applause. Y'all have a good evening.